Want to have your very own free-range egg farming business? Welcome to Green Grass Egg Farming Podcast with Daniel O'Brien, the show dedicated to giving you the latest tips, ideas and interviews to help you produce the best tasting free-range eggs and sell your eggs for the highest price. And here's your host, Daniel O'Brien.
Daniel O'Brien here. Welcome back to Green Grass Egg Farming. My special guest today is Troy Blackman from Waterfall, Australia. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. It's going to be a good podcast today. We're going to talk about Troy's farm, and you've got a couple of chicken caravans and cattle. But first off, I want to hear a bit of the background of the farm. Tell me a bit about how big it is and where you're located there.
Yeah, sure. So our farm's called Waterfall, Australia, and we're located on the north coast of New South Wales. So for those that are familiar with the area, basically we're 15 minutes inland from Coffs Harbour. So for people that maybe don't know where Coffs Harbour is, we're 6 hours north of Sydney and about 5 hours south of Brisbane.
Yeah, great. And how many acres is your farm there?
So we've got two properties that we run our cattle and chickens on, and then we adjust on a number of other properties. So in total, our whole operation is about 400 acres in size.
Yeah, right. And it's all pretty close to the Coffs Harbour region, like all the farms are pretty close.
Yes, yeah. So all the farms are within, well, two actually adjoin each other, and then we have another one that's about 5 kilometres away from sort of the main hub of our operation.
Yeah, great. So tell me, how long have you been farming there?
In this area, we've been farming for about 4 years now. So not too long, but as a family, we've been farming for sort of over 30, 40 years.
Yep, okay. So your main operation, sort of cattle and chickens. Tell me about the cattle, because you do some breeding and sell off some studs, don't you?
Yes, yeah. So we basically started our whole operation off the back of a stud Charolais setup. And so we moved to the area and then initially brought in some stock to start, I guess, the core of our breeding herd. And so for about maybe 12 months, we just operated with that. So building up our younger females and then also our male bulls, which we sell to basically the whole East Coast. And so we ran with that for about 12 months. And then after that, we got that sort of set up in all the different areas that you need to set it up, from the property to marketing the animals and just making sure everything's flowing well. And then we decided to add chickens to the mix.
Yeah, so why did you decide to add chickens to your operation?
I guess our area in general is not really known as a farming area. So we're, like I said, only 15 minutes inland from Coffs Harbour, and it's very coastal. So the type of pastures and various other things that you have in the area, I guess, are not like very well conducive to farming life. And so in order to make it profitable as an enterprise, we needed to diversify and get more income streams happening.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so a lot of people sort of around like Coffs Harbour, there'd be like a lot of lifestyle blocks, like a lot of sort of 5 acres. Would that sort of be right?
In my area, so like that 15 minutes inland area, most of the properties are around 100 acres in size, because basically there's rules as far as what you can actually do with your property because it's zoned as rural. But even those 100 acre size lots are lifestyle blocks, so they're quite large in a sense. Pretty much up until about 5 years ago, the majority of the farms in the area were dairies, and then due to obviously the recent sort of industry changes and various other things, they've basically all sold up and moved on, and then been sold off as those lifestyle blocks. And so myself and sort of 2 other operators are basically the only commercial enterprises in the area as far as agriculture is concerned.
Yeah, so most people having their lifestyle block, do they run sort of a few cattle or anything on them, or are some of them just empty?
Some of them are empty and they just simply mow them and various other things, but I'd say probably it's a 50-50 split. So horses are quite big in the area, and with Coffs Harbour having like an airport quite close by, you have a lot of people that say live in Sydney and then come up for weekends and things like that. So they have caretakers on their property, and then they can come up and sort of experience the farm lifestyle, and then they can head back to their homes in Sydney.
Yeah, right. It's sort of interesting. I see it so many places. You've got like 100 acres, and as you said, like some of them are empty and they're just mowing the grass. And I think it really, I like that example, because a lot of people that don't already have a farm, it just opens up the possibilities that you don't have to own a farm. There's so much land you can go out there and lease, because as you said, some of these people, they've got caretakers in, so they want someone to look after it. So I think anyone that's sort of starting a farm that you don't have any land, look for vacant land nearby. And it sounds like you've got your own farms, but you're also leasing others.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the Coffs Harbour Council is sort of, I guess, quite innovative in the way they sort of connect local people with the farms as far as adjusting and leasing goes. The council has a lot of federal funding to set up little initiatives. So they have like a website, which I can find out later for you guys, but basically it's a bit of like an Airbnb type scenario where it's connecting farms with people that are looking to lease and adjust in various setups, whether it's cattle and chickens or even vegetables and sort of more diverse operations as well. And so, like I probably meet with our local council at least quarterly, if not more, and we have various days where we sort of get together and they actually ask the farmers for advice, and then it's a very sort of two-way approach as far as what they can actually achieve together and make it more productive to build up the area as well, and then also support the local farmers or the people that are looking to get into the industry.
Wow, that's fantastic. I know there'd be a lot of people listening that would wish their local council would be that much forward thinking. That's really good, and we'll make sure we do a link to that website, just in the show notes and the transcription. So. No, that's fantastic that the council's, that much forward thinking to connect people. I think it's a massive opportunity, like all over the place, whether it be Australia or even abroad, linking up land with farmers. So, yeah.
Yeah, another point I'd probably add to that, like a number of things that I did to sort of, I guess, help my situation when I was approaching owners and people that had property in the area was that you can't simply just have a property and then just let it sit there, because it's going to deteriorate and basically don't go downhill when you just let it sit there and grass grows and you have weed populations overtaking and things like that. So for people that are looking to set up leasing arrangements and various other things, I guess in a sense you're kind of doing the farmer a favour, as well as them generating an income from you leasing on the property. You can also tell them that you are basically improving the value of the property by maintaining it in various different ways.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people that do lease land, they sort of go in with that benefit to the farmer, like especially when they're going with chickens. They say if nothing else, you're getting chicken manure spread over your farm, so your grass is going to be greener. It's just and the chickens going through it is going to eradicate like a lot of weeds sort of that come in, because you're getting that nitrogen on your pasture, so stronger pasture, which will sort of drown out the weeds. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, so many benefits. So tell me your journey. You had the cattle, and then you've sort of started in the chickens. Tell me how long ago that happened, and what was it like when you sort of first started some of those challenges?
Yeah, sure. So I guess towards the mid part of 2014, myself and sort of other family members, because we're purely like a family-run farm. So we have myself, my auntie and uncle, and then also my grandfather as well, that do different roles on the property. And then also during different seasons, we employ people for casual work as well, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is later on. But pretty much we did a lot of research before we even started. So we went and visited other farms. I went and visited Chris Eggett in Warhope, which I know is a good friend of yours, and helped sort of develop the chicken caravans from the get-go. And then from that, went and visited a few other farms sort of in southern New South Wales that had different operations as well, and discussed with them like different ways as far as the practicalities of having chickens on the farm and how that could work to marketing the eggs and setting yourself up as an enterprise that way. But by sort of I guess October, November in 2014, I made a little sort of prototype of a chicken caravan out of just an 8x5 foot box trailer, and it had 10 chickens in it, and we got some portable fence netting, and we just decided that this was going to be our intro into how it actually works from like a day-to-day point of view. So we set it up in our paddocks, and we had our cattle in there as well, and the way that we run our chicken caravans now is, I guess, what's called a holistic management approach, and we can sort of go into what that is a little bit later if you like. But we gave ourselves, like, before we made, I guess, all the investments from a financial point of view and also a time point of view to set ourselves up for a commercial operation, we made sure that it was actually practical for us and our farm in the area. So I put together the chicken caravan in the trailer. It was just very humble. It was just like nest boxes, and then we had hay in there as well, and then it was just like corrugated tin on the roof and things like that. And it totally did the job. And so we had 10, 15 Isa Browns in there, and we started trialling it on our property.
And what did that teach you? Because I think it's a great thing to do, to start with just a few, just to see what chooks do, what they don't do. And did you get sort of much learning from that you've now taken on to sort of your management now with like a couple of caravans and a lot more chickens?
Yeah, absolutely. So as any farmer would know, time is your friend and also very much your enemy, and so you have to be as efficient as possible. So I very much learnt very quickly that I couldn't just come and go from the chickens, 5, 6, 7 times a day to do different jobs. I had to be very sort of focused and be very attentive to what I needed to do when I went there. So when I was going down there, I was collecting the eggs, but I was also making sure that the water was fine, that their feed was fine, that their fencing was functional. So I didn't have to go down there more than one time a day. And then that freed me up to do every other job that I needed to do around the property, because when we first started, I was wasting lots of time doing that just in travelling time. And that's probably something that's transitioned to all the little other enterprises that I do on the property, that idea that you need to be focused when you're sort of heading to a location, because the travel time is the thing that actually sort of lets you down when you're trying to be efficient.
Yeah, it's very interesting, that travel time. I know when I've consulted to farmers to actually budget that in, because it's all well and good to say it only takes me 8 minutes to collect the eggs from the caravan, because it really doesn't take long. You wind them in, they've got food, they've got water, and you go. But depending on where you put the caravan and how many gates you have to open, it could take you 15 minutes just to get there.
That's exactly right.
And you're 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back. Well, there's half an hour of your day. And as you said, that travel time, it adds up, especially if you visit them twice a day. Now, most chicken operations, you only have to visit once a day, but it's good to talk about that travel time. And I think any farming enterprises, just look at how you are setting up your farm, and if you've rather than going through 5 gates, can you put in a laneway? So you go down the centre and you just open the one gate for the paddock, because it definitely adds up over the whole year. The on-farm travel time, it can be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was something that helped us with one of our properties. So we have our main property, which we call Waterfall, and that's where all our chickens and young cattle are. And then we have another property, which we call Two Rivers, and that's sort of our main mature breeding cattle property. And at the time when we sort of were first starting, we had this Waterfall property that was reasonably well set up as far as fencing and infrastructure goes, but our other property, Two Rivers, was a blank slate. And so it allowed us just to slow down and really consider how we were going to set up our property to be most efficient. And so exactly that, we realised that we could be more efficient with the way that we set up our paddock sizes, so we could have more efficient grazing, so we could bring cattle through, graze, and then allow the paddocks to rest a lot better. And then we could also have laneways and various other things like that, where we were moving stock through, that allowed us to be definitely more efficient.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you started with 450 hens, or after your initial ones, you got 450 hens.
Yes.
And then and now you've got 900 hens all up. Is that right?
We've actually got 3 caravans in operation at the moment. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So when did you, from your first one, what time frame until you brought your second and your sort of third one in?
Okay, so we got our first caravan at the start of 2015, and then we basically gave ourselves probably 6 months between when we got the caravan on the ground to when we decided we were going to order our second caravan, and that enabled us to make sure that the chickens were operating the way that we knew they would, and that we've done our research and that everything sort of matched the plan that we put in place, and that we had our eggs marketed, and then we set up our branding, and then sort of established ourselves in the area, because the idea of buying direct from the farmer or buying locally produced goods is a little bit unfamiliar in the area that we're in. And so I guess educating people on that sort of concept was a little bit new. And so we gave ourselves a bit of breathing space with that. And then once we established ourselves and we had a regular clientele with restaurants and retail outlets, then we actually couldn't keep up with demand. We were ready to sort of push the button and go for caravan number 2.
Yeah, right. So what period of time from when you started marketing to when you couldn't keep up with demand?
It was actually quite quickly. So I did about probably a month and a half of just simply, I guess I refer to it as cold calling. So going and physically seeing local businesses, whether it was cafes and restaurants and also retail outlets, so small grocers and things like that. Yep. And then giving them the information. And that was probably the most difficult part of this whole process, was approaching a business and saying that we could supply you with eggs, but at that time I literally didn't have any eggs to provide them as samples, and so I kind of had to go with the approach that, like, I have all these not empty promises, but like I have this ideal and I have all these things in place, and do you want to jump on board, but I don't have a sample to give you. And that was a pretty interesting thing to go through, for sure.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It definitely is hard. Like, you don't want to wait till you've got too many eggs to start marketing, but you don't want to do it too early. So it is that case, what does come first, the chicken or the egg? Like
Exactly.
So you put in about a month and a half, about 6 weeks into that.
Yes.
Were you sort of finding at the end of the 6 weeks all your eggs were sold, or?
Yeah, so by that stage, at the end of that 6-week period, I probably had about 2 weeks before our chickens were going to start laying. And so I spent a lot of time with the hatcheries and the places that we were dealing with that were going to bring our chickens to us, because we bought them at basically point of lay, so 17 weeks. So I could plan within the sort of 2-week period when I would be able to supply them those 600-gram size dozen eggs. Yep. And so and a lot of the local people were quite, I guess, forgiving in that sense. So the type of people that I approached were small local independent businesses. I didn't approach any, say, larger supermarket chains and things like that. And they were essentially sold on the idea of the ethic behind what we're doing. So we run an organic operation, and then also the pasture-raised approach as well is something that no one was doing in the area. And so with, I guess, their local customer and their local clientele becoming more educated and wanting more, or the demand was increasing for ethical produce, they sort of understood the idea that they could be at the forefront of that in our area. And so that was one of the main marketing tools that I used that got us those first clients. Yeah,
great. So you sort of found after 6 months, did it sort of hit a trigger point? You realised you're going to need more chickens then, did you?
Yes, yeah. So it was just simply we couldn't keep up with demand. So we had, I guess, roughly a 50-50 split of restaurant clients and retail clients. And the restaurant clients are interesting in that you kind of can't not supply them their eggs. They sort of need their eggs to obviously supply their customers. But the retail outlets were a little bit more forgiving in that if they sold out maybe 1 or 2 days or even 3 days before you were ready to supply them again, they had the ability to obviously disperse that over other products and things. So, they were more forgiving for that, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, righto. So you got a second caravan, so your flock went up to 900. And how was that, the marketing, when you first got those next lot of chickens in? Did you have to do a lot more marketing to sort of sell off those eggs, or?
So 50% of the supply of them was already sold before we even got the chickens on the ground.
Wow.
That was from current clients, and also I had sort of a list of people that were just in waiting, essentially. and then I did the same approach again. I sort of made a decision from the start, which I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I deviated from it a little bit, that I was going to only approach local independently owned businesses. That way I could keep a very good relationship with in most cases, the manager owner that was in charge of the operation. And that way, if there was any issues or things like that, then I could basically talk to them directly and hopefully solve that in a very sort of human, face-to-face way.
Yeah. And you found that, is that still the case now, that you deal with just the smaller retailers, or are you dealing sort of with bigger companies and that now, like selling your eggs?
Currently, we're only dealing with local independent operators. I did for a time, maybe about 6 months ago. We put our eggs in. I probably won't say them on the podcast here, but on one of the larger retailers. And basically, when I tried to go into their stores, even though they're marketed as being local and independent, all their offices were based in Melbourne. And so it took me probably about 2 months before I could even get in touch with someone that could assist in that whole process. And then also another further month after that, we got into the stores, and the stores, I guess, weren't on board with the idea of promoting, say, the ethic of what we were doing and the idea that we were local and things like that as much as I would like. Yeah. And so it just wasn't very successful for that reason, because people had the choice. And then I guess a large part of it was also a lot of the people, or the demographic of people that were going to these grocery stores, were just simply after the cheapest price. They weren't after a specific type of produce. So the organics and things like that didn't really play a part in their decision making.
Yeah, I think there's some big lessons there, and it's one thing I learnt when I started my egg farm is the bigger the company you approach, the longer the time frame. It's not a case you ring them on Wednesday, see them on Thursday, and they're buying eggs off you on Friday. As you said, it's not like that at all. And the bigger they are, the more disconnected they are from you, being a supplier, being the farmer, and really them and also their customers, they're looking at a price list. They go, right, you've got eggs, how much are they? They don't really care about your brand or how they're grown. I didn't have much success with it, and it's interesting hearing your story of, it doesn't sound like you had a lot of success with them either.
No, not at all. And that sort of brought us to probably one of our biggest challenges that's helped us in what we're doing now as well, but differentiating ourselves from other egg producers as far as free range, and then obviously pasteurised and organic as well, because the clients that, or the customers, sorry, that were in these grocery shops that were quite large, just didn't really have an understanding of the difference between an organic pasteurised production and just a general free-range production. And obviously that's changing now, and it will continue to change over time. But this was probably 12 months ago when this happened. And so the idea of stocking rates and the way that animals are raised and animal welfare and things like that wasn't really at the forefront of people's choices when they were buying eggs at that point in time anyway.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about your operation. You said before you do run a holistic management sort of operation. Just explain sort of how that works, like your cattle and your chickens sort of working together.
Yeah, sure. So in very simple terms, we have our properties, and they're broken up into a number of paddocks. And I guess like I have an understanding of the amount or the stocking rates that the paddocks can take and for how long. And obviously that changes at different times of the year. And so we'll bring in a mob of cattle. And I actually have different mobs of cattle. So we have our stud operation, which is stud males. So we have bulls that we sell at mature ages to the whole East Coast. And then also we have our female breeding operation as well. But we also have a separate beef breeding operation as well. And so the animals that are, I guess, probably around that 2-year mark that we actually retail direct to customers, they're in a specific mob that I graze in front of our chicken caravan. So they're about sort of 40 to 60 head in size. And so they'll go into the paddock at the start, and they'll graze down the paddock. And usually that takes maybe 2-3 days, depending on the time of year, usually longer in summer. And then once they've grazed down the paddock, they'll be moved on to a new paddock. And then I'll bring in the chicken caravans in after. And this is probably something that's I guess people weren't really aware of, but we actually move our chicken caravans quite a lot because we've seen the benefits of not overstressing the pasture. So the chickens basically scratching away too far, or the caravans, ruining the pasture in that sense. But we move them probably every 5 to 7 days into a whole new area. And then within that 5 to 7 days, we actually move them once more as well. So within the setup that we have. And so the cattle have gone out of that paddock, and then we bring in our chicken caravans, and they're run basically side by side in the electric fence netting setups, and then they're put onto the pasture. And then because the cattle have been in there before, you've got all the cattle manure and various other things on the ground, and so the chickens will do what they do naturally, and they'll scratch away at the manure, and then they'll eat the worms in the manure and essentially be like the vet in the scenario there. And so they're cleaning up our pasture for that. And then something that I didn't really understand fully before we started, but I do now definitely, is that the cattle are obviously very picky with the type of pasture they want. They want the most palatable, nutritious thing, whereas the chickens actually aren't very picky, and they're kind of like goats in that sense, where they'll eat the things that the cattle have left behind. So they consume quite a lot of their diet off the pasture as well. So and that's another benefit of moving, as well as we reduced our feed rates because we're moving so much. So they're consuming that larger amount of their diet from the pasture as well. And so with that, they'll stay in that area for 5 to 7 days, and then I might have to move the whole setup of the chicken caravans maybe once or twice within the size paddocks that we have, and then they'll move on to the next paddock after that, which the cattle have already been in and grazed down.
Yeah, right. So since having the chickens, what benefit have you seen to your pasture now you're running this system rather than just running the cattle?
I guess from a soil health point of view, I've seen a more balanced report. So we do soil reports basically every 12 months, and sometimes we've done them sooner just out of interest and things like that. But definitely a more balanced report as far as the mineral content in the soil. The organic activity has increased just tenfold from what it was before, because when we moved to the property, they were using I guess like a very straight synthetic mix, so very high levels of urea and things like that. And so from that, it's definitely in simple terms just made a more balanced approach, which from a mineral point of view and from a pasture point of view, it's allowed our pasture to access the good sort of the minerals in the soil that it couldn't access before. And then when you look at, I guess, the levels of topsoil and various other things in the soil, you can see that's slowly growing as well. So that's definitely a benefit. Yeah,
fantastic. Something else I want to touch on is I believe you've built a farm shop on your farm, like a retail shop. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So this probably started when we decided to retail our beef direct to customers. So we tried probably for a little while just selling our beef to wholesalers, say from the abattoir and things like that. And we found the price that we were getting, and this was in I guess probably late 2012, 13, just wasn't making our operation viable. And so like if you're talking around that time, we were talking maybe probably about $4 a kilo for dress weight carcasses. And then obviously that's changed quite a bit now, where you've got up to sort of your $6.50 potentially, depending on what you're providing. But at that time we just decided that it wasn't viable. And our long-term goal for the whole approach was to market our produce direct to customers anyway, but it just kind of fast-tracked that because we realised that it just wasn't viable to do what we were doing. And so slowly we developed a relationship with a local butcher, and this was something that did take quite a bit of time, because approaching a butcher and asking them to process your cattle for you and bag it up and get it ready for your customers is a tricky subject, because in some respects we're kind of taking customers away from them. But then in other respects, we're a completely different thing altogether as well. Like the butcher that I deal with now didn't really provide a product which is similar to what I'm providing now, and so it wasn't really in direct competition with what he was doing anyway. And then also it's providing him with steady income as far as because he charges a rate for us to have our bodies processed through him, and so it's quite a good regular income for him as well. And so from that, we established every part of the beef sort of setup so we could supply direct to our customers, and then we needed more or less a pickup point for that. And so we started starting open days on our property, and that allowed the people that were already buying our eggs to come out to the property and see the way that we raised our chickens and our cattle in that holistic management approach. And that actually bumped our egg sales up probably about 25% actually, just in a very short space of time. And that led us to making our third chicken caravan purchase pretty confidently. And then from that, it was just simply the people coming out to the farms and looking over the farms and the tours, and then they were picking up their beef packs that we'd hire a portable cool room, and then people would come out and pick them up from that. And then we decided that we were going to make it a regular thing. And so from, say, food authority licensing point of views and things like that, we wanted to be, even though we were already compliant, we wanted to be more compliant and more, professional in the way that we were approaching our customers. And so, we had a point of sale system set up in one of the rooms that we dedicated on our farm to that. And then slowly that just grew over time to having our eggs and beef for sale from there.
Yeah, so with the farm shop, is that only open sort of on open days and tours, or how does that sort of operate?
It is, yes. So at this stage, we probably do a tour and an open day maybe every 2 to 3 weeks. It surely doesn't go much further than that. So usually we do probably 2 a month. And then with that, we are open on Sundays. We found that Sundays was sort of the time where most people had free time, with Saturdays being maybe the majority of the days that families do sports and things like that.
Yep.
And so, we trialled with Saturdays and we trialled with Sundays as well, and we just sort of did a bit of a switch, and then we realised that Sunday was the day that was most convenient for everyone, and so we stuck with the Sunday. And then with that, we sort of catered our times around the time that was most convenient for our customers. So on a Sunday, we'll open at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we'll be open till 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And then at 12 p.m., I'll do a walking farm tour of our whole operation and show everyone the cattle and the chickens and how they work together. And then during that whole time, people can purchase eggs and beef from our shop. And then we also have a mobile coffee van that comes out as well. So it's a way of people making a day of it. So they come out, and if the weather's sort of appropriate, they'll have picnics and various other things. And then we just sit around and kind of hang out for a bit, and people just ask questions about the farm and the way that we farm and things like that, so they can be more aware of what goes into the produce that they're consuming.
Yeah, that's great. Like, it's great having such that level of transparency where you just don't get that. And I think when you use that as a marketing technique of come out to the farm, you can walk around, we can show you what's going on, you can purchase the produce. Like the big supermarkets like we were talking about, they can't compete with that. They just so can't have that level of transparency, and people want that. They want to know, like, where did it come from? Tell me more about my food.
That's exactly right, and that sort of brings up a bit of a discussion around the ideas of, say, certifications and things. And in my experience, I couldn't afford the costings involved with being certified by a third party. But what I could afford over time was to build up a client base that understood exactly what we did by opening up our farms and being 100% transparent as far as what we do, the feed that we have, what we do with our pasture, all that sort of stuff. And so over time, it became sort of an entity of itself. And the idea of our farming methods were kind of unique to ourselves. And so when people were approaching our produce in the shops in town and things like that, they could trust our branding more so because they've come out to the farms and they've seen that. And that's just an ongoing, evolving process as new people come to understand our produce and try it for themselves.
Yeah, fantastic. So most of the people that come out, are they coming from the Coffs Harbour region, about 15, 20 minutes away, or...?
Sometimes even further. So we supply Coffs Harbour, which is 15 minutes from where we are, and then we supply further up the coast, about maybe 30 kilometres away from that. And then we also supply further south down the coast, maybe probably 40 minutes drive further south from Coffs Harbour as well. So there's quite a large circle area, like I call it sort of the Coffs Crater area, where we have like a large number of people, and because social media is sort of a big part of what we do and how people can connect to our farms beyond actually coming out to them and being on them, it spreads quite quickly. And so, we have people that potentially would travel maybe an hour and a half to come to our open days,
Yeah, no, that's great. So if someone wanted to find out more about your operation, where can they find you on the net or on Facebook, or to book in for one of your open days?
Yeah, sure. So our website's waterfallaustralia.com.au, and then we're also on Facebook. Just search for Waterfall Australia, and we're also on Instagram as well. Just search for Waterfall Australia as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and I'm looking forward to doing another podcast with you, and we can probably talk about the farm shop and the open days of actually how to do that, and because there's obviously huge benefits to your farm. But thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. And that's the best thing about the idea of making things more local and more sort of personal, is that the idea of the farms and the farmer operators being more smaller, is that this whole community around the idea of the ethics and things like that we're sort of raising animals differently. There's really no competition in that between farmers. And so the idea that we can get together and do things like this podcast and that to help each other out is a great thing. And that was something that I valued immensely when I started, was the idea that people would open up their farms and give their time, mostly free actually, which was amazing, to educate me on the practicalities of farming in this way, is something that I'll do my best to pass on as well, and keep the whole thing going, because it's such an important thing. Yeah,
definitely. We all learn so much more when we just like collaborate the ideas, especially in the farming space, because sometimes it can be you can sort of be a lone ranger. Everyone's got their farm doing their own thing, but when we open it up and talk about it, I think we can all benefit so much.
Yeah, and it's absolutely less daunting that way. You can sort of realise that some of the problems that you think are probably specific to you, everyone's gone through it, and most of the time there's a solution that is in place already, and you don't have to maybe reinvent the wheel to find a way of overcoming that, which is great.
Yeah, that's right. So, well, thanks again, Troy, and I'm sure we will talk soon.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks for joining us on Green Grass Egg Farming Podcast. For transcripts and other free resources, please go to greengrasseggfarming.com.